Hi, everyone. Welcome. As folks filter in, I just want to announce that I am Ed Herzl. I'm the Program Assistant for Disability Voices United, which is a member of the Disability Vote California Coalition. Thank you so much for joining all of us today. As folks filter in, I would like to take this opportunity right now to have our amazing translator, Lorna Silva, come online and let folks who might need a Spanish translation know how they can access that on the back line. I'll also put it into chat.
Para las personas que hablan español, pueden acceder a la interpretación simultánea al español llamando al número 551-241-6310, de nuevo, 551-241-6310 para escuchar la interpretación al español. No se necesita código de acceso. Gracias. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Lorna. While that's happening, while folks are continuing to filter in, I am setting up this webinar to live stream on Facebook. If you'd like to share that live stream with your networks, which we encourage, I will be posting the link in chat as well. So just to let everyone know, this is going to take me about 30-45 seconds for the live stream to get set up. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is Judy Mark, the voice of Judy Mark. We're just trying to get Assemblymember Nazarian in. So if Assemblymember Nazarian is on, is in as a participant, if you could just put in the chat what the name is that you're under so that we can promote you to being a panelist, because we're not seeing the name Nazarian on anywhere here. So if you are here, as an attendee, please identify yourself so we can do that. Thank you.
This webinar is now live streaming on Facebook.
Okay. Thank you, Ed.
You can go ahead and begin, Steve.
Okay. Hi. Welcome to Disability Vote California's series of candidate conversations. I'm a volunteer with the Disability Vote California movement, which is an amazing collaboration of 36 organizations, all working together to promote the most powerful vote turnout that we've ever seen in the disability community. If you go to our website, disabilityvoteca.org, you'll see the names of all 36 organizations that are collaborating on this. And you'll also see an amazing assortment of tools and information that will give you all the information and capabilities you need, not only to vote for yourself, but to make sure everyone that you care about and you're in touch with also has the ability to vote. This series of conversations that we're doing essentially takes the place of the large public gatherings that we've done in the past, town halls and candidate forums. Obviously, in recognition of our COVID-19 situation, it's not recommended or even possible to bring large groups of people together. We sure wouldn't do that. But instead of that, we've invited a number of candidates in races, both county, state, and congressional, to join us for more intimate conversations in which you can not only watch and listen, but through our question and answer format, you can ask questions and listen to people that are running for your votes to talk about our issues. There's no better way to know who we're voting for and what we're voting for than to hear candidates talk about the issues that are most important in our lives. And so we really appreciate the participation of candidates, both county and state. It's important to know that we're entirely nonpartisan, and we've made the exact same invitations to both candidates in each race that we're following. Last Friday, we had a wonderful conversation with the other candidate in the 46th Assembly District, Lanira Murphy. And that conversation and all of the other ones are recorded and are available through our website. Today, we're going to have the pleasure of a conversation with Assemblymember Adrin Nazarian, who has represented the 46th District for several years. With us today, we have a number of constituents in that area who are members of our larger disability community, and in turn will be asking questions listening to answers and encouraging you in the audience to participate through the question and answer status. We're now waiting for the assembly member to get connected to us. We may have had a little bit of a technology glitch, and he should be joining us momentarily. I would like to add, while we're waiting, that the importance of these conversations is that it's not just for the people in the district who are voting in these races, but hopefully these conversations can be watched all over the state. Because if you're in San Francisco or you're in San Diego, you may feel that the political process is out of your reach and out of touch. You never hear TV commercials or see literature with candidates talking about issues that are important specifically to the disability community. And so you may think that they don't have positions, but if they don't, they should. And the best way to make sure that candidates know that we're here and that we represent maybe 25% of the entire electorate is to reach out to them. And when you watch these candidates answer questions, you'll see that they will respond and they do care about our issues. So if you're in San Francisco or you're in San Diego or anywhere in the state, think about how you could reach out to the candidates in your local races and do the exact same kind of conversations that we're putting on here.
So I'll take a moment, even though I wasn't planning on being on this webinar, to ask Steve if you could take just a moment and call Assemblymember Nazarian's office to make sure that there's no technical glitch, and I'll promote Disability Vote California while you're doing that. So my name is Judy Mark. I'm wearing a t-shirt because I wasn't oh, he's in the waiting room. Okay, hold on, folks. Let's look. Thank you, everybody, there is no waiting room.
Yeah, there's no waiting room on this.
There is no waiting room, and I do not see his name as a participant. So, okay, so somebody has sent him the correct link. So hopefully we're getting on. So while we're waiting for him to get on, I just want to tell everybody about Disability Vote California. We have been doing webinars every week, and we also have been, we have a great deal of publications in plain language about the propositions, about how to register to vote, about your rights as a person with a disability to vote. We really, really encourage you to check those out. Our website is at disabilityvoteca.org, disabilityvoteca.org. And we really hope that you will continue to join us. We are starting now to move into our Get Out the Vote phase of our campaign for the disability vote. And we will be trying to do outreach, a personal outreach to all the people with disabilities in the state who are connected to regional centers or other organizations. And we really, if you are interested in getting involved, please reach out to us, join our mailing list, and we really could use a lot of volunteers in this sort of last effort. The other thing is, for those of you who are in the Los Angeles area, which I'm assuming most of you are because of where Assemblymember Nazarian sits, we will be, Disability Vote California will be on 2 local TV news stations this week. Tomorrow we will be on KTLA News, Channel 5, talking about Disability Vote California. And on Friday afternoon and evening, we will be on the local CBS affiliate channel, CBS owned and operated station Channel 2, as well as the affiliate KCAL9, talking about the work that we do and how to help people with disabilities overcome any barriers that they may be receiving, they may be facing. So we hope that you'll join us. We also plan in the next week or two next week, we will be doing a webinar on the propositions. We know that a lot of them are very complicated.
Okay, so it just worked for me.
Okay. So we know that they're very complicated. And so we're gonna really walk through the different propositions and kind of explain them in plain language, talk to you about how they impact people with disabilities, and get you educated so you can get your votes out. Hopefully everybody will have received their ballot today, or I know people who received it on Saturday. We have not yet received ours, so we're kind of bummed, but the second you get your ballot, it's really start thinking about voting early. There are various ways you can vote, but one of the major ways that you can vote is to just pop it in the mail. If it's 28 days before the election, so I'm pretty sure we'll be okay. But if you are concerned about putting it in the mail, you can also place it in LA County in a drop box. There are drop boxes in every county in the state. I believe that LA County has over 300. We just looked ours up yesterday on the local the Register of Voters website. There is one a mile away from my house that we can ride our bike over and put it in a drop box. Looks like a mailbox, but it's just for your voting envelopes and your ballots. And so one of the most important things to do, this is really important, this is some of the advice we've been giving, is that you sign the outside of the envelope. It's critical that that gets signed. If it's not signed, they will have to check back with you, and you don't want to be voting provisionally. You also want to try to make your signature as close as possible to the signature that you registered to vote with. So for some people with disabilities, that may be a challenge, but it doesn't mean that your vote will not be counted. What will happen is if there's a concern that the signature is substantially different than the one that had been originally signed, what will happen is they will reach out to you and ask you if that was actually your ballot. You will confirm it, and then your vote will count. So what that means is that you should really get your ballots in early in case there's any technical issues. You can also track your ballot in the state of California. You can sign up with your name and what will happen is, and your address, and what will happen is that they will send you an email saying, we sent your ballot out. And then when you put your ballot in, once they receive it back, they will email you and say, we received your ballot, it has been counted. So that's another great way to ensure that you are voting this year. I'm going to look in the Q&A because there's always questions, but it's not coming. Oh, there it is. Okay, these are questions. Good. They're for the assembly member who I see is coming on. While he is connecting, there is one question that I believe he is there. Assembly member, are you with us? There we go.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a good webinar.
Version of planes, trains, autumn.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your patience. We've filled the time with some general discussions about the importance of everyone's vote and making sure that everyone has the opportunity to vote. And so before I turn this over to our panelists to begin the questioning, I just want to let you know that a number of us watched the press conference yesterday that you and a number of state and local leaders participated in. And we have nothing but respect and appreciation for you and other public leaders when they speak out on the moral justice questions. And that entire press conference devoted to a plea to end the violence and a plea for justice and peace in Armenia is greatly respected. And we just wanted to let you know, we know you have much on your mind right now, and we really appreciate you taking the time to join us in this conversation. With that said, I'm going to turn.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for saying that.
I'm going to turn this over to Jessica, who will help you introduce yourself to our community. Thank you. Jessica?
Hello, Mr. Nazarian. Thank you for joining us today. My opening question to you, just to give everybody a little bit of background, is what experience, in your experience in the Assembly, how would you say the developmentally disabled community has been on your mind, and how do we play a factor in impact?
Well, I thank you, first of all, Jessica. It's great to see you. I think the issues of disability have weighed on me greatly for several reasons. First, as I've gotten older, and I've appreciated the challenges that individuals with disabilities have in trying to just do everyday normal, participate in everyday normal functions. I've just become better in tune. Even as a child growing up, when I would experience family members with disabilities and the challenges they would have, the level of consciousness wasn't there exactly to know all the difficulties and challenges there are. So, and through work, I've had the opportunity also to benefit from a lot of the expert thinking and understanding and studies that are available, as well as just the experience of meeting individuals who are able to better educate me, or at least answer some of the questions, whether basic or technical, or why, filling the context of the history of what the challenges have been. A lot of times that's the issue. You know, a lot of issues form many layers of an onion skin, and so you need to peel them and understand why a certain issue is where it's at. So I feel that I've definitely matured about the issues, both from some level of experience as well as from the benefit of working with various constituent groups while I've been in office and before when I was a staffer.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Assembly Member. I'm Ken,
Hi, Ken.
Ken Lane from Task. We are, for everyone's purposes, we work with folks with individual and developmental disabilities. 1 second here. Sorry about this. Anyway, I'm also, as you know, physically disabled, so I represent a whole lot of folks who have disabilities. And what we want to know from you is how you see your role in the Assembly in terms of supporting the issues most important to folks with disabilities.
So, you know, at different times it changes. There's when there's an opportunity to be able to lead, I'm happy to step up. Just 2 years ago, or Lord, last year, 2020 feels like it's been 5 years. Just last year in 19, when there was the issue of looking at how we can potentially increase wages through budget augmentation, I took advantage of the opportunity, set up meetings with budget leadership in the Assembly, and asked individuals from the community to come up and for us to be able to work some things out. Didn't get to exactly where we wanted it to be, but there was some augmentation made. So, you know, you have in these positions, you have many different avenues of addressing an issue. It could be either legislative, it could be working through the administration, it could be working through the budget process. Sometimes it's also even making sure there's enough awareness of how the process works, enough awareness so that you can engage more activists in the process itself, so that you're bringing awareness to your colleagues. Sometimes it's just a simple fact of colleagues not knowing enough about something and not knowing the challenges that are prevailed upon, because, you know, let's say there are, you know, not as many of my rural colleagues may be aware of some of the disability issues, because more of the disabled community tends to be in rural community, in urban communities. So, you know, a lot of times it's also an opportunity of making sure that your colleagues are up to speed on the various issues that are impacting your districts, and making sure that they're aware of what's going on about different issues. So, so there's many different ways of addressing an issue. Sometimes legislative is not the only path. Legislative is basically when you've exhausted everything else. Sometimes the best route is just trying to do something through the budget process. Sometimes you even do it in a way where you just put enough money to make sure that a program is successful, and then that then can become a growing effort and program in order to expand that small successful program into a more bigger program, larger scale program.
No, that's great. Very helpful. Thank you.
Hello, Assembly Member. I'm Sharroll and I work at New Horizons. We serve individuals with special needs. I'm also a mother of my son who has special needs as well. The disability community has worked for many years to implement the historic legislation and Supreme Court cases such as Olmstead versus LC, the Medicare home and community Supreme Court and base a service waiver program, the Americans with Disability Act, and California's Lanterman Act. So people can live in the community rather than institutions. But the right to live full lives with equal opportunities is only as strong as the commitment to enforce laws and fund essential support services. Where do you stand on this issue?
I firmly stand in support of making sure that people have every opportunity to be able to live an equal life. It's easy to say that, though. And sometimes even legislative efforts fail us because we could put something in legislation but not fund it, and that's where those are the instances that bother me most, because if we are going to act in the spirit of what it is that we're saying we want to accomplish, then it's critical that we also budget appropriately. The challenge also is that as you all know, is that the disability community doesn't enjoy some of the protections that are afforded in many other arenas. And so every time there's a budgetary shortfall, you're the first to experience cuts. And so it's important that when we make strides in making the appropriate investments, we also look at how we need to ensure that we make every attempt not to fall below certain levels. And I say it in that vein rather than saying something stronger, because I also am becoming very weary of those protections that are put into place. You know, education, for example, K through 12 education enjoys a certain protection through Prop 98. Well, when we do that, what we've done is basically make the single largest item, budgetary item in our annual budget, state budget, also determine that everything else needs to be cut in order to maintain education levels of funding. And while education is a priority for me, I still feel when you do that, you then are succumbing many smaller portions of the budget, forcing them to be cut so severely that the essence of the programs are lost. So you know, and sometimes when we resort to just a across the board 10% cut, a 10% cut in the disability community can have much more devastating impacts than a 10% cut in economic development activities. So there are some things that, in order to be penny wise but pound foolish, our decisions need to be adjusted to make sure that we don't make mistakes that have longer term consequences.
Thank you.
I'd like to jump in with a little bit of a follow-up question on that one. Because as you know, Assemblymember Nazarian, you often see my friends here on the panel and many others up in Sacramento. And typically we're up there pleading, begging sometimes to avoid a drastic cut. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. But that constant sword hanging over people, that, as you say, when the scales need to be balanced, they're always balanced in what we're considered discretionary.
Yeah.
So we can't go back to an era where there were institutions and back bedrooms and isolation and segregation. That's not an option. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering, beyond recognizing this problem, if there's any ideas that you might have, even if it would take years and lots of work to accomplish them, that could lead to a more stable structure for disability services. We could begin working on a plan. We could begin working on an initiative if we could see that there was a direction to go for stability over time. Do you have any ideas about how we might go in that direction?
I think there's some developing awareness of this, especially tied into homelessness. And for decades on end, we didn't address the impacts of homelessness, and it was only further compounded because of decisions made where institutions were closed, and so the nexus of homelessness and mental health and disabilities are so well tied in that I feel like right now, given all the attention the last 3-4 years through bonds and various state and local measures that have been passed, and the greater awareness that's come about addressing homelessness and the services pertaining to homelessness, not just a shelter, because it's not just a brick and mortar program, but it's ensuring that people get the services they need to become, to be reintegrated back to some extent into the community. I think this space also allows the disabled community to be very engaged, because of what a big role the mental health component plays. Now, might be confusing some things together a little bit, or it may seem like I'm confusing it, but I think there's an opportunity, and I think that's where I'm interested also in making sure that some of the conversations that we're having on homelessness takes into consideration, but strongly points out to how disabled community is also severely impacted, and how we can on a continued basis provide these services that are necessary. I mean, I don't mean to confuse different issues here, but I feel there's so little of a safety net that it's very easy for all our vulnerable populations, whether physically, mentally disabled, elderly, you name the circumstance, to find common ground in being homeless and find common ground in being in the levels of poverty where they spiral down into a very burdensome level of need for support. And so I think if these problems took us 40 years to get here, we're not gonna get out of this in 5 years. We're gonna be struggling with homelessness and all of these impacts for the next decade or longer, because there just isn't gonna be a sheer amount of money in order to address all of these issues that have been kicked to the curb for a very long time. So anyway, I'm sorry I'm going off a tangent a bit now, but I feel like there's a great nexus between the two issues that needs to be better addressed in a combined way, in a enjoined way, so that we can continuously also provide the support necessary at certain levels.
I think we have some questions for you from our audience. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Yes, thank you very much, Assembly Member. I have some questions from our audience that are really, really fabulous. The first one I'd like to address that I actually just want to get out of the way is, what about consumers that are part of regional centers that are conserved? From Ismail Maldonado. And I want to let you know, Ismail, that on the Disability Vote California website, which I'm going to put in the chat right now, we have resources that talk about how people who are conserved can oftentimes still vote and participate in our democracy that way. So I want to make sure that you are aware of that. I want to move to Carla's question. What can special education families within LAUSD do to get the school district to implement the LA County Public Health Order that allows children with IEPs to be able to return to campus for, at a minimum, assessments and one-to-one therapies?
So part of the challenge with that, if I'm understanding the question correctly, part of the challenge with that also is the teaching core, and to what extent they're comfortable in getting back into these circumstances as well on one-on-one training. You obviously can't force individuals to want to get back into certain settings if they feel that they're vulnerable. So that seems to be one of the bigger issues that we haven't really been able to get around. And I think we're going to continue struggling for some time to come, Carla. So I very much appreciate the question, and I understand the struggle, but short of maybe finding ways of further incentivizing teachers to want to come back, but that would also be a short-term solution, but at a time when we're probably going to be dealing with significant cuts. I don't know if we're going to be able to implement short-term incentives like that. So I would say, please be engaged. Feel free to be engaged with my office as well on this front. I'm happy to continue working with the county health offices, the public health office, to see how this could be an issue area that gets the attention and gets better addressed, and not necessarily be dependent on the school openings whenever they may be.
Thank you, Assembly Member. I have another question from Daniel Garcia. Do you have any future plan in making more affordable housing accessible for people with disabilities?
Absolutely, but I mean the idea is to make just affordable housing available, period. And when we say that, I think we need to also be very specific about what we mean by affordable housing. There's both affordable housing that is just discounted housing that will allow individuals to pay a certain portion less, or what they can afford, or so long as they're meeting certain criteria. But then the second part is just the sheer failure on at the state and local level in providing enough housing units so that overall housing costs would come down. This is not just affordable housing, this is the affordability of housing side of the equation. Because when you look at the supply and demand curves, when the supply is less, the price is naturally going to go up. And so we've arbitrarily put ourselves in this situation by creating certain restrictions that, if it was well intentioned, didn't really have long-term thought of how that would impact society. And the reality is also, look, I'm saying that at a general level, but then when you look at the San Fernando Valley, bear in mind that you have a community in the San Fernando Valley that just up until 80 years ago had a population of roughly about 25,000. This was a huge ranch, and it's grown in 80 years to now serve a population of roughly 1.8 million. So when you have that level of fast growth without the careful planning in order to meet the needs of infrastructure, which includes water, transportation, utilities, even public benefits like education. We had such a shortfall of schools at a certain period that we passed some bonds in a flurry and built all these schools, and then we saw that there was a decline, and so we didn't really necessarily need all those buildings that we had built. So we go through these unplanned major investments that then have a long-term consequence, and we've been struggling with these. So to answer your question, it's absolutely critical. You're going to be seeing us work on many different fronts addressing housing. One of the things that I'm going to work on the housing front is to look at how we can hold some of the larger investment firms that sit on thousands of properties, single-family properties, accountable for how they're manipulating the market. If you have a certain supply of housing, no matter how many more you build, if you have a very wealthy investor coming in and making purchases of the housing stock, they are positioning themselves to be able to manipulate the pricing in that market. And it's of two benefits. Not only in the short term do they make money off of the higher leases, in the long term, they're benefiting off of the increased value of the investment. And we've allowed this to happen in our housing space, and we need to be able to figure ways out of addressing this issue and addressing it extremely quickly. And there's been some attempts, but it just has not really gone after these venture capital firms the way it should have.
Thank you, Assemblymember. On that note, on very much pursuing the housing accessibility, Talene Kachadorian has asked, what are you doing? And I would like to sort of add what is within your record, if you'd like to speak about that as well. What have you done in the past to help develop more affordable housing in urban areas for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities? Section 8 is not readily available to most of our young adults that are in transition age, and we do not want them moving over an hour away to have access to appropriate or amazing housing projects.
Let me answer it this way. It's really hard to answer the question specifically for a subset of a community, because when you're trying to address the needs, that many people are benefiting that have various different needs. Especially, for example, let me give you an example. My first term of office, I authored AB 2222, because what I noticed happening was in the better situated communities in the Valley, for example, Studio City, Sherman Oaks, Valley Village, where there were older structures that had been there for 40, 50 years. The payment is all done, it's free and clear. They do enjoy Prop 13 benefits, and yet on that large property footprint, they only have, let's say, 10 units of an apartment building. They're all rent control. Well, some of the spec developers would identify these buildings, make the purchase, and because of the zoning upgrades over time, be able to now build 40 units on that same footprint, take advantage of state bonus density programs and provide, let's say, only 10% very affordable housing, so only 4 more units, and then build a building and put it on market, and that would be that. And so what you'd have is the displacement of 10 units residents, that some of them may have been elderly and or disabled, and of course those are folks that tend to also not want to move when they're already in a place where their rent is going to be very predictable. It's only going to increase between 3 to 5% annually, and so they adjust their budgets based on that, and whatever income or benefit that they're receiving may provide enough to cover the expenses and the annual growth thereof. So what the bill did was address this disparity where developers would come in, build 44 units, only 4 would be now low income affordable, whereas before there was 10, and then get market rate on the other 40. So they would be making pretty good money on their investment, and yet take away a net 6 units from the market. We were bleeding this way for decades, because as the property values in some of the parts of San Fernando Valley continuously went up, more and more investments like this would be made, where more and more of the buildings from the 40s and 50s and 60s would be demolished, and these new buildings would be put in their stead. And so our number of rent control units were sliding down significantly, while our housing trust funds had only enough money in it to provide only a handful of units per every 100 units of rent control units that were leaving the market. So what my bill did was said, if you want to build a new building and take full advantage of all the state programs, that's wonderful. You will have to ensure that you provide the same number of affordable housing units on top of whatever bonus density you take advantage of in the new building. So that 44 unit building would now have to have the 4 units that you took advantage of through bonus density, plus the initial 10 units of rent control that previously existed on that footprint. Now, this was a small step of trying to address and stymie that overbuilding at just market rate, but instead being thoughtful about how you are able to preserve certain living standards for individuals who are already going to be disrupted in the process of that changeover of the development. Now, this was a small step of ensuring that we maintain the number of developments that we had before, and then from there be able to continue developing more units. Sorry for the very lengthy answer, but some of these things sometimes, if you want to really describe it well, explain it well, take a while.
Thank you very much, Assemblymember. We really appreciate sort of that very in-depth explanation, because oftentimes we don't, as constituents, receive that kind of knowledge. So thank you very much. At this time, I would like to open the line for any questions from our Spanish backline. For Lorna to ask that question, and that takes her a minute to ask that question. So while she is asking that question, I would just like to direct folks to the chat. I always, during our candidate webinars, put the official website of the candidate in the chat. So if you would like to learn more about Assemblymember Nazarian's record, policies, and platforms, please visit his official website. In addition, if you would like to watch the recording of this webinar or of any of our other candidate webinars, they will be up this afternoon. I am the one who will put them up on disabilityvotecalifornia.org. Lorna is saying there are no questions. Thank you, Lorna. So I will turn this back to Steve at this stage and to our other panelists who may have questions for Assemblymember Nazarian. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. Housing is clearly one of the most important issues that we face. We have others as well, and I know Jessica's is primed to ask another question about healthcare. Jessica, would you like to?
Yes, hi, Mr. Nazarian. A few years back, I ran into an issue where Medi-Cal made all of its participants go on to 2 optional plans. As a result, I lost my doctors, I lost my hospital. It took me years to get them back. I went to ERs just to get surgeries done that I needed to stay alive. Anyway, I was able to fix my problem. It took several people, but I fixed my problem. The issue is there are several people who receive Medi-Cal that are in my circumstance or similar to mine that have issues accessing the healthcare needs they require, including doctors. How could you best assist this type of issue within your realm of your position?
Thank you, Jessica. And that's one of the hardest things to deal with, because no matter how much you feel like you've created an impervious system, there's always holes, there's always cracks, and there's always certain circumstances where people fall through these cracks. That's why, I mean, both as chair of aging committee and long-term care, and I bring that up because of just the natural parallels that exist between aging and disability community issues. You know, one thing I've always focused on, and I even do this for my staff, in just when it comes to fixing potholes or local level issues that don't have anything to do with the state government. I always feel like we need to figure out a way of a catch-all system so that if you call someplace, there's a no wrong door service provided, that person will walk you through somehow through all the steps and the myriad of maze entrapments in order for you to get to the result that you need to. Because otherwise, it's very easy for someone to say, well, here's the number you need to call this place. You call that number. The worst thing that can happen is when that number no longer works or is disconnected. In the age of now, so many very mediums of communication, we don't struggle with that as much anymore. But as a staffer 20 years ago, one of my most frustrating things was to give the phone number of an agency and have the constituent call back and say, well, that number doesn't work now. And so what I would do was literally keep the person on hold and make the call myself and go through the process in order to be able to get a validated response myself, and for that agency person to know that I was calling from an elected office, so that I could kind of just dovetail the person to that office. This is just a small example of what you're talking about. It's not exactly what you're talking about, because sometimes there's also just the inherent problems in the way the programs are set up, and one doesn't really. Sometimes programs may have conflicting issues. I'm assuming that's what you're really getting at. But those are also things that we can try to address through the budget process, and we have been, in order to try to ease accessibility and ease also tandem programs or support, or when there's a variable or a change in a program, that you're able to continue getting the assistance that you need. I think what you're probably talking about is just making sure that a ombudsman service or a no wrong door approach be instituted, which I honestly thought there was already, in order to better provide some of the services. Am I wrong about that? There isn't?
No, to my knowledge, there is not a no wrong door service. As a matter of fact, if you're
Okay.
on a system such as Medi-Cal, which is state provided, it's the opposite. They can close more doors because it's state funded insurance.
Yeah.
So the
Okay.
follow-up-
This is something I can look into.
the follow-up to that, I think, is as the state moves and the feds, everybody moves towards capitated insurance programs, people that have complex and challenging medical needs and healthcare needs are not sought after.
Sorry, Steve, I lost you for a minute. My earpiece went out. Say that again.
Well, in general, I think
As the state goes towards capitated funding, and then
what we've found is that people that have the most complicated, most expensive, I hate to put it that way, but the most expensive healthcare needs are the ones that find themselves losing access to a doctor, losing access to a healthcare facility, and they get bounced around. What we're interested in, I think, is how can you help ensure that people who have the most complex needs are well served by a system like Medi-Cal?
Requires me to look into it a little bit more. I honestly, I wasn't aware that there isn't some kind of a ombudsman program, or at least I assumed there was, that would help. And I think this is something that, if I'm understanding you correctly, would also address some of the questions you're bringing up.
Yes, if there was, if you don't mind me answering, if there was some sort of ombudsman program or place where people could go to get more direct assistance, that might be of some help, because people get lost a lot within the healthcare system of Medi-Cal, and many people, such as myself, have it from birth. So as you get older, you will learn all these little snags that you may not know exist before. But in answer to your question, no, there's no ombudsman system. There's nothing like that already built into it. There are independent systems depending on what you receive as a person, but you have to go search them out for yourself. The healthcare system is not an assistant factor in that.
Okay, well, I'm happy to look into this.
Ken, did you want to follow up with housing, or did all your questions about housing get answered?
I don't think all the questions of housing are going to be answered.
I was muted, but it's kind of what I said, yeah. But with respect to, there's so many issues. One, I know last week, a young African-American man talked about the fact of his fear of going out into the community, being met with police, lack of sensitivity and awareness of his needs. What kinds of things can you do to address some of these ongoing issues of criminal justice in the criminal justice system here in LA?
Oof. This is very similar to the housing issue. I mean, some of these things have been ongoing for such a long time. Look, I think there are some things that are just a fundamental problem when it comes to criminal justice reform that we still haven't addressed. And so we become emotional and we respond to the emotion without really addressing the foundational challenges. And one of the things that I kept reading more about, and just this year, I introduced an audit to be conducted by the state of all law enforcement agencies in the state of California to look into their practices of who is it that they're even hiring? What kind of a vetting are they going through in order to make sure that the person is coming from a place without certain issues that are going to further manifest themselves in their career and get to the heart of implicit bias through better screening systems.
And you add to that the fact that our guys who are developmentally disabled, they may not be able to communicate properly with the police, or they might, God forbid, run. And what are the consequences of that? I know at Task we've had that situation. I know Cheryl's mentioned for them at New Horizons, it's a real fear because of the potential consequences.
Yeah, I'll never forget about the incident about 3 years ago or 4 years ago about a developmentally disabled individual panicking and running, and the police ending up shooting them in the foot. And when the caretaker of the individual asked, "Why did you shoot when we're trying to comply?" The police officer just said, "I don't know. It was instinctive."
Yeah.
Which tells you also the challenges of training. I sometimes don't. I don't think, I shouldn't say sometimes, I don't think some of the law enforcement agencies, especially some of the more rural, smaller areas, have some of the training necessary. And I shouldn't pick on by saying rural. I just feel that in general, certain law enforcement agencies don't get the training necessary in order to be able to better deal with the situation. LAPD, for example, in the 80s and 90s did some remarkable. They went in and recruited individuals from gangs in order to be able to better understand the psyche and the language and the mindset of gang members. And I think LAPD, as many faults as it has, by the way, because just 5 generations ago, it was one of the most corrupt police agencies, has just made such a remarkable turnaround and has implemented so many programs that have actually are now serving as models for a lot of other police agencies. I mean, you look at LAPD and LA Sheriff's Department side by side, you have 2 institutions. One has taken so many steps to try to protect individuals and set certain standards so that it protects its citizens. And then on the other front, you have folks that, articles now more and more are coming out about, white related Aryan Brotherhood gangs or fraternities, and a lot of different.
Assemblymember, you've cut out.
Yeah, sorry. When I get a call, it does that. Am I back now?
You are back. Mhm.
Am I back?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Sorry. All right.
We're getting close. We're getting very close to the end of the hour. In fact, I see we're there, but I have one last question for you, if you don't mind.
Please.
Okay. If you are,
I'm on a call.
If you are, hi.
Yeah.
It's great.
Their class is done.
Yeah, I understand. Hi.
Hi,
This is David Beg, and this is Alex. Say hi.
Hey, guy.
Hi, Alex.
If you are returned to the assembly by the voters in the 46th district, can you tell us 1 or 2 priorities for our community that we can look forward to seeing your leadership on, and how can we work with you to accomplish those things?
Ooh, 1 or 2 priorities. I'm in the middle of working on my bill package. So whatever answer I give you, it's most likely going to change. But on the housing front, what I had mentioned a little while ago about targeting venture capital investment firms, or just investment firms that have made quite a bit of money in the housing front ever since 12 years ago with the economic downturn from the last economic downturn. That's something that I'm going to be putting in a very concerted effort into. But that also just requires quite a bit of research. We're struggling to find accurate data, as you can imagine, because a lot of these investment firms don't want to say exactly how much property they own. So we're still in the research phase of this. Excuse me for 1 second. Second, where I've done a lot of work is just healthcare and healthcare disparities, and making sure that there are ample consumer protections in healthcare. One area is a bill that was held this year, to my great frustration, the insulin copay cap bill. So it's even a bill that wasn't something that I brought up, but it was brought to me as a sponsored bill with the American Diabetes Association to work on. And it was a very straightforward bill. We just place a copay cap of $50 on insulin. And my argument for that was, why should we allow a genetic, an inherent genetic issue serve as a monopoly for the drug or insurance industry, more for the insurance industry than the drug industry. Believe it or not, by the way, that's where a lot of misconceptions also happen, because once the drug company sells the product, it's done with it. At that point, the insurance companies can figure out what rate to charge. And so they can set a certain rate and charge it. And then at the back end, go and collect even more money through copays. Well, if they've already made their money based on the agreed upon copay amount, $20, $30, there isn't necessarily a need to, increase those copays to 100, 200. In certain cases, some people were paying upwards of $500, $600 a month, because some individuals need to use more vials of insulin. So these are critical issues that, if you don't address, can easily lead to further healthcare complications, which then means who's going to be on the hook for. And I say this because we don't need to think about things as from a good-natured perspective. We can look at it as what it means as a cost on the state. Why should the state pay more in future healthcare costs when we can address the issue today? So those are some of the challenging. Those are going to be some of my priorities that I'm going to work on, and I'm always open to taking on issues impacting the disability community, especially in my role as chair of aging. So if there are things that we can partner up on, this is the best time to actually talk to me about this, so that we can include it in our package this year.
You will definitely be hearing from Task. Real high priority. I know, Sharroll, for you guys too, for all of us in our community. Working with adults, with older adults is so critical. So glad to hear it. We'll be bugging you.
It is never a bother. My pleasure and honor. So thank you.
Yeah.